Yes, this morning I'd like to speak about a very important subject. Let me first apologize for starting a little bit late. We had some little technical difficulties, but we are on the air. And this morning I want to start off by looking at what is addiction. There's so much confusion out there as to whether a person's a social drinker, social user, and or whether they are addicted, whether they are alcoholic. And I decided I would research this a little bit, and one of the definitions of addiction is that it is a chronic relapsing brain disorder characterized by compulsive engagement in a behavior or use of a substance despite harmful consequences. And I want to elaborate a little bit on that because a person might be a heavy drinker, for instance, but not necessarily be addicted to alcohol. A person may be engaging in any behavior and it may not be an addiction. Right? A person could be gambling and still not be addicted to gambling. And herein lies that little gray area and leads to a lot of confusion because a lot of people, say, look, I could stop when I want. I could, and they actually can. They have control or appear to have control over their gambling, over their social media addiction or usage. I shouldn't say addiction, because some people can actually go on the internet, go on the various social media platforms, and they have control. They can decide when. And in this program, hopefully before the end, I want to especially target the addiction to social media. But at this stage, we're just looking at addiction because I don't want our listeners, you people out there, to just jump to the conclusion because somebody's spending a lot of time on social media or they're drinking heavily and getting into trouble that they may be alcoholic. And how do you distinguish between one and the other? And let's go back to the addiction. They say addiction is a chronic disease. That is, it is not a one-off. You get drunk one time and you fell off. You fell, you got yourself in some trouble. And you would, some people will want to label you as being addicted. So it has to be chronic. It also has the feature of relapsing. That is, you of your own accord will, when you realize, look, this is causing a problem, you start trying to manage it. You decide, all right, I'm going to stop drinking or I'm going to stop gambling, only to find that, you know, you keep relapsing. You're going back, even though you promised yourself. And there's a certain level of compulsion, even though you don't want to, you shouldn't, but you can't seem to be able to stop yourself. You tell yourself, look, I'm just going to take one beer or two beer or take one smoke, or I'll just put one bet, or I'm just going to go on the phone for maybe 5 minutes, just check my messages, only to find that you get stuck on it. And whether it be a behavior or whether it be a substance, you can become addicted to it. And an important element here, very important, that distinguishes whether you're addicted or not, is that you become aware of the consequences, the harmful consequences, that it is causing problems, whether it be legal problems, whether it be relationship problems, whether it be health problems, financial problems, problems on the job. It is causing problems. You realize that you get charged by the police once or twice for driving under the influence, and you still seem to be going back to it. Now, mind you, a lot of people will find all kind of reasons to rationalize it. But once you are aware, this is a critical element in addiction. Once you are aware that it is causing problems and you still cannot seem to stop yourself from engaging in the behavior or using the substance, then you are addicted. And you have to be honest because there's a tendency at this point to rationalize, to make excuses, to say, well, look, I didn't eat before I went to drink, that's why I got drunk, or they provoked me, that's why I went and did this, or, I'm following a particular issue. And it's a popular one because I have been following social media, certain issues, political issues in the United States and so on. And I tell myself, I'm just going to see what is the position with this matter, only to find I keep scrolling now and the time is going, and you get into something very interesting. There's so many areas of interest on social media that something is going to grab your attention. And I recently remember a conversation with a relative, and this is a very old person who did not even know how to use social media, would just listen, take a call or call someone. That was about the extent to which they use the smartphone. But then they were introduced to the use to go on social media. And this person, when you get to this age, you don't go out and socialize too much. You're mostly at home now, looking at television and all of those things. And only to find within weeks, this person is now on social media all the time because they have found this very interesting. So I'll speak a little bit more about that. But what are the core elements of addiction? One is compulsion. That is a strong and often overwhelming urge to engage in the substance or the behavior. And as I say that, a lot of us seem, in Trinidad in particular, we seem to think, only people who are alcoholics are addicted, or people who use, especially when we use the word addict, the first profile image that comes up in our mind is some young person who is using cocaine, because we have literally labeled them as addicts, so that even people who are alcoholics don't see themselves as addicts. Addicts are people who use cocaine. And that is a misnomer. That is a misinterpretation. Anyone who is addicted, anyone can be addicted to a substance. And when I say substance, not only illicit substances, you can become addicted to legal substance. Well, of course, alcohol is a legal substance, but you can be addicted to pills and medication. And so too, you can become addicted to behaviors, ranging from gambling addiction, overeating, to sexual addiction. Addiction can take many, many forms. So that, and then of course, there are addictions that do not cause too much harm, social problems, and are literally acceptable in society. Like some people are addicted to music, some addicted to certain types of activities, and it is not causing a problem to them or others. So there are good addictions, like people who are addicted to going to AA meetings now. That's a good addiction. You can save yourself by doing that. But one of the elements of addiction is compulsion, where a strong and often overwhelming urge to engage in the substance or behavior, whether it be drugs, alcohol, gambling, or social media, where you're sitting there, but your mind is keep going to wonder if anybody has responded to my post, what they have done, especially when you're posting things on like TikTok and Facebook and so on. You want to see how much likes you get, how much people, what they're saying, especially if you have now ended up in a controversial position and you have people attacking you and you feel the urge to respond, and it becomes a tit for tat. So another feature of addiction is the loss of control, where there's an inability to stop or limit use even when you're trying to. And this is why you have to be honest with yourself, because you will know. I mean, you will want to tell people, no, I don't. It's not a problem, but because you don't want to appear to look like you're weak-willed or you know you have become addicted. But you know within yourself, and I'm speaking here from experience. I knew for years I was addicted to alcohol. I had secretly tried so many times to stop and failed, but I was still present as being able to be in control. You understand? But there's often, of course, loss of control, and then there's a craving. That is an intense mental or physical desire that drives continued use. So that even when the person is not using, there's an obsession with it, like the cocaine addict. And this is especially pronounced in the cocaine and substance abuse addictions, even in the behavioral addictions, the gambling, because you're sitting there and I've heard it. I've actually witnessed this where people that everybody pass in the community. Hey, boy, what marketing they making today? What you think the banker is going to play, or you're interpreting certain little phenomena. People analyze dreams and certain um, social activities. If a cat cross the road, or if you dream a certain thing, all of those things have meanings for people who gamble, play, for instance. So there is that mental obsession with the behavior or the drug. And of course, because of withdrawal, which is a completely different discussion, where anyone who has been using a drug to help them to feel better, to change their mood, to lift their spirits, and all of that, when it is wearing away, whether it be a prescription drug or whether it be cocaine, marijuana, or any one of these psychotropic drugs, illicit drugs, when it is wearing away from the body, there's a tendency to go into withdrawal. That's the body's natural reaction to it. And in withdrawal, it can be very scary, can be very painful. Some people start trembling, having the shakes. Some start hallucinating and seeing things that are not there. So that, even for behavioral addiction, there's a withdrawal. People get anxious when the time coming for the mark to bus. When they're going to declare what was the winning in the playway and all of those things, the many types of gambling they have online now. When the time comes to find out the results, a punter can tell you that his heart rate starts going up. He starts getting anxious. And of course, when it is declared and he realizes he lost, they go into withdrawal, they go into depression, just like the drug abuser, the substance abuser. So that there's withdrawal, which could be emotional in the case of the people who are addicted to behaviors, or it could be physical symptoms, like I described, the, the shakes and all of that, when the drug is reduced or stopped, even when it is reduced, there are withdrawal symptoms. So that addiction can be substance based, that is, people can get addicted to alcohol, nicotine, prescription medications, or illicit drugs. And it can be behavioral, that is, process addiction, it is called, like for gambling, gaming, shopping, eating, or digital device use. So it's not only substance. You can have behavioral addiction, which is also known as process addiction. And that will include gambling, gaming, shopping. A lot of people, when they feel depressed or anxious, women, and I don't mean to scapegoat women, but it's popular among women to go shopping, buy up a set of things, and they come home and now they get depressed after it because they spent money that they were supposed to pay the light bill, they're supposed to pay the mortgage or the rent, and now they gone and blew it out on things that they don't really need, and now they have to engage in a whole set of, well, cover up, because how are they going to admit to their partner, whether it be the man or the woman, that I blew the money out on this, and there's a, you know, an attempt to justify, well, look, it was on sale, and all, you all know the story. So that the American Society of Addiction Medicine defines addiction as a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. So that addiction is really multifaceted. That is, it can have physical dimensions, it can have mental dimensions, it can also impact the brain, the way the brain works, the brain circuits. It can also be derived from genetics. That is, if our ancestors were alcoholic or drug addicts, we can have inherited that tendency, that predisposition. And of course, it is environmental, because we live in a society where, I mean, drinking and drug use has, we are continually accepting it. We have reached to the point where we have become desensitized. It's not such a big thing again. Everybody seems to be using this, and it is expected. When you drink, you get drunk. Or if you're having a friend to get together, you must have drinks. And when people drink, they get drunk, and it's fun until they fall in the drain or they get pulled up by the police. You understand? Then it's no longer fun, and that's when I a lot of people seek my assistance. And it can also come out of individual life experiences. Like some people lose their job, get estranged from their partner, and that could precipitate the use of the drug that they might have started using recreationally, and they remember it changes their mood now. They start using it to help them to cope and become dependent. And then what happens is people develop tolerance, you know, because the same 5 milligrams of the medication that used to help you to sleep now is not working. You have to take 10 milligrams and then 15. And of course, the same one beer that used to get you tipsy, you have to now drink 2 and 3, and then you move into red rum. You have to move to punch-in rum, and you know the story. Those of you who are drinking and were familiar with the subject realize that when you develop tolerance, you have to use more, and you start using it more often. Once the problem persists, you will tend to, because of tolerance, have to use more of it and more often. Now, I want to spend a little time on social media addiction. Now, just before we go to that, though, addiction is not just a moral weakness or lack of willpower. It involves changes in the brain's reward system, especially the dopamine pathways, which reinforce the behavior and make recovery challenging without support. So, this is why, even though the person might have insight, they realize it is causing problem. They know they're addicted now. They're not willing to tell anybody, but for that same reason, because of the stigma associated with addiction, a lot of people struggle with it in secret. They don't want to let any, and I have had that experience myself. The last thing you want to do is to let the people, even siblings, even parents, you don't want them to know that, look, this thing has you beaten, you know, so that, but again, without help, it is very, very difficult, because this thing actually rewires your brain, and especially the dopamine pathways, which reinforce the behavior and make recovery challenging without support. And this is why a lot of people have had to, even though they were able to use the formula that is suggested in Alcoholics Anonymous, that is, put down the glass, avoid that first drink 1 day at a time, or avoid that first smoke 1 day at a time, or avoid the going on the social media, you know, one day at a time, or restricting it to maybe just 1 hour for the day during the day and not in the, turn the phone off in the night. There are many, many different strategies. They find that still they need support, they need encouragement because, especially if you have been using the drug or the behavior to help you to cope. So that now I especially want to speak a little bit about digital addiction. What is a digital addiction? It is said to be a behavioral condition characterized by excessive or compulsive use of digital devices such as smartphones, computers, tablets, or gaming systems that interferes with daily life, relationships, and your general well-being. So that I think that is very comprehensive, especially using your smartphone to or tablet, or of course they have these gaming devices. Now, what are some of the key characteristics of digital addiction? One, again, is loss of control. That is the inability to limit screen time, even when intending to. And I'm seeing this happening with a lot of young children. A lot of parents are complaining to me now, that children, they thought they were asleep. They go to their rooms, but they have the cell phone, they have the computer, and remember we came out of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and a lot of children now were issued laptops. They had to do their assignments on laptops, and a lot of lessons are now being given online. I have relatives who are doing lessons online to help them to meet their examination requirements and so on. But these, as a result, they have this smartphone, they have this laptop, they have their tablets in their rooms, and they're not only using it to go online to do their schoolwork, but they are now socializing. They have friends online, they have chat groups that they're chatting with all over the world. They are playing games, competitive games online, making friends online, socializing online. And next thing you know, and of course, going on the social media, the various, I don't want to advertise them, but generally Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, on all of those things. And before you know it, what happens, and as I speak about this, we all have a biological clock inside of us that have been programmed since we were born, and we have been readjusting it. When we were just born, we would sleep like 23 hours and only wake to have a meal to eat, to have to be fed and go back to sleep. But as we get older, we tend to require less and less sleep. But young children of school age generally need at least 8 hours sleep. Even adults who are working hard need that 8 hours to rest and repair the body, all the tissues that were damaged while they were working hard during the day. However, as a result, the biological clock starts to make you feel sleepy at a certain time. So if you're around 9 o'clock, you go to sleep, then you would have slept 3 hours until 12, and then five till if you're getting up at 5, and you would have, if you went to sleep at 9, you'll get your 8 hours rest. But then young children are going to bed at 9, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they're going after they watch the news or whatever, had dinner and so on. But then they get on their phone. And now some of them, when the time to sleep at 9 comes, their body is producing their own sleep uh, medicine, as it were, right? And they fight it off because they want to stay on the phone. And once you have struggled to remain awake, your body produces a stimulant, adrenaline and things like that, and counteract your normal um, the some chemical that makes you feel to sleep, you know, so that now you will once you have passed your sleep period and you struggle with it and you fought it off, then you will not be able to go to sleep until the next 4 hours. But you are still on the phone, and over time, what happens is your sleep pattern changes. And now I am seeing young people all 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, they're still up and they are struggling to wake up in the morning. They have to be, helped to get up. And there's a quarrel to start the day with the parent shouting and screaming, look, you're getting late for school. And then they go to school, but they are asleep in the school. They can't focus on what the teacher is talking. And sometimes, lectures can be a little bit boring. It can be not so interesting. And children are not able to follow schoolwork. And it is happening not only with children of school age, let me say this, it is also happening with adults, you know. But for people like myself who are retired, I could go back and sleep during the day, if I wake late in the night. But for those people still in the world of work out there and has a 8 to 4 job, and children who have to go from 8 to 3 or 2:30 in school and pay attention, it is a different matter. So that they are, and even when they are able to stay awake, there's that preoccupation because they lose control. There's a preoccupation and a constant thoughts about being online and checking the devices to see, what I put out there, what are the likes and dislikes, the responses I'm getting. And of course, there's withdrawal symptoms, as I mentioned before, that is associated with this behavior as well. And these will include feeling anxious, irritable, or restless when not connected. And I have seen, in the old days when you take your children to nursery school and you're leaving them there, they will cry because they want to come back with their mother. But now, the mother could leave once you give them the tablet. If you take away the tablet, they would start to throw a tantrum. You understand? Because they can't seem to detach from it. And of course, similarly, like the substances that people use, there's also tolerance in this behavior addiction, where the person is needing more and more screen time to feel satisfied or entertained. They're staying longer and longer on the devices. And I have seen my little grandchildren sometimes coming here and they will go and take their grandmother's cell phone. The other one will take the mother phone and they on it. You understand? And they will, and even adults, I see adults here, on the phone and they are texting all the time and there's a running conversation. And I want to highlight here, maybe we need to revisit this because I'm seeing we getting close to closing time of this program. Maybe we need to come back and look at this. I could continue this next week, but I have seen people sitting at the dinner table, family, and they're texting the person on the other side of the table rather than just raise their head from the phone and say, "Hey, pass me that," or something they want to communicate, and they will just text them, and the person won't even raise their head to acknowledge it, but will send back a message on the phone. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. So that what is happening with social interaction? What is happening with relationships? People are not going and looking for their neighbor anymore. We don't even know what people look like because now we're having meetings on Zoom and you are able to turn off your video, and so you've been speaking to a person for years and you don't know how they look today. So there's much, much more to be said about this. And I'm sure maybe I will have to revisit this whole topic. Again, next week we could probably review some of these things. And if you have questions, please feel free to send it, post it on the YouTube, my YouTube site. You just type in my name, Ramnaresh Dwarika, Addiction and Recovery, and the programs are there on Facebook and YouTube. And you will be able not only to access this program, but all the programs that have been done over the last few years are posted there on various aspects of alcoholism and drug addiction. So, in the interest of time, I will stop there just to remind you that this program is being recorded and posted on YouTube and Facebook and will be repeated on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. For those of you who want to go back and listen to it, and feel free, there's a number there, 768-5925. You can text me if you have any questions, and I'll be only happy to respond to them. So thank you again for joining me, and tune in next week, Thursday, same time, and we'll have another program in the series, Addiction and Recovery. I want to thank Radio and TV Jagriti for giving free airtime to host this program as a social and community service. And again, hang in there, you can recover. Recovery is possible. You alone can do it, but sometimes you can't do it alone. So see you next week, Thursday. Bye for now.